My parents said, "We spent 95% of your savings to buy your sister's house." My sister mocked me. "You don't have a single penny left." But I burst out laughing, because they didn't know that those savings were just 1% of what I had. I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't the kind of laugh that comes from humor. It was the kind of laugh that bubbles up when everything around you shatters into pieces, and the only thing left to do is to let out the sound of a life cracking open. And crack open, it did. I'm Keith, 28 years old. I've worked my way up from being a sales assistant to a regional manager for a major retail chain. It wasn't easy. Nothing about my life had been easy yet. It felt like my family thought it was just supposed to be handed to them, like I was a walking wallet for their whims and desires. For years, I lived under the same roof as my parents, Alberto and Rosa, and my younger sister, Valerie. They never seemed to care much for what I was trying to build for myself. No, they were too focused on their own issues. My parents both worked, but their jobs barely covered their personal expenses. My mother worked as a salesperson at a boutique. My father was an administrative assistant at a small office. Valerie, on the other hand, had a degree in business administration but didn't seem interested in actually working. She always said she was for the right opportunity. But the truth was, she was more than happy to live off me. She never paid a dime toward rent, utilities, or groceries. That was all on me. I didn't mind at first. It wasn't the easiest thing, but I'd been the quiet provider for a long time, paying for everything the least I could do, considering they were my family. But after a while, it started to eat at me, the lack of appreciation. The comments like, "Why can't you buy us a better house?" Or, "We wish you earned more so we could get a car." Or Valerie's favorite, "If you were truly successful, we'd have our own house by now." Something shifted 6 months ago. I had reached my breaking point, so I decided to test them. I was done with the silence. I had to know if they truly cared for me or if they just saw me as a resource. I had to know if they would respect and think I was always going to be there to pay the bills. I went to the bank one afternoon, opened a new debit account, and deposited $10,000. $10,000 that represented exactly my actual savings. I had worked for years, saving and investing, building a life that no one in my family knew about. They thought I was just scraping by, but the truth was far from that. I had accumulated over $1 million in savings and investments, but they never had a clue. They only knew the version of me I had let them see, the one who was struggling to make ends meet. They didn't know what I was capable of. They didn't know how much I had. I handed them the card one evening at dinner. "Oh, what's this?" My father asked them at the card with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "It's a card with all my savings," I said casually, though my pulse quickened. I had always been the one to take care of them, but this time, I was in control. "I want you to use it for the house, rent, utilities, groceries. That way I don't have to keep transferring money all the time." Their eyes lit up when they heard $10,000. $10,000. My mother repeated, "Are you sure you want us to have all of it?" "You're my family," I said. "I trust you. Just use it for household things." My father nodded, taking the card, his voice low with a promise. "Of course. Just for the house?" Valerie said nothing, but I noticed the smirk on her face. It made me nervous, but I didn't say anything. I had to see how far they would go. The first 2 months went smoothly. I checked the account regularly, saw the rent, utilities, and groceries being paid for. I started to think maybe I'd been too suspicious. Maybe they really were trying. But the third month was different. Small, strange purchases began to shy $500 here, $100 there. Luxury items, clothes, dinners at fancy restaurants. Things that had nothing to do with the house. They were clearly using my money for their own pleasures. I didn't say anything. I kept watching, kept waiting. I had to know just how far this would go. The truth came out. For the next 2 months, things seemed to settle into a pattern. I didn't want to admit it at first, but for a brief time, I actually started to feel like maybe my family wasn't as bad as I thought. They seemed to be using the $10,000 just like I had instructed. Rent, utilities, groceries, all the right expenses were covered. I checked the account regularly and saw only the usual charges. It wasn't until the third month that things started to feel off. The first sign came at noon. One afternoon, I checked the account balance out of habit, only to find a $500 withdrawal. There was no charge for the usual household expenses. It had come from a high-end clothing store I recognized, a place my mom had mentioned a few times, but never actually been able to afford. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I waited, maybe it was a one-time thing, I told myself. But then the withdrawals kept coming. A few days later, another $800 was spent at a fancy restaurant, followed by another charge for a trip to a boutique. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My parents, who could barely scrape together enough for the essentials, were now living it up on my dime. The worst part was that they didn't even acknowledge it. They didn't even seem to realize what they were doing. They thought I wouldn't notice. Valerie's behavior only made it worse. She had barely said a word about the money, but every now and then, I'd catch her giving me these looks, almost like she knew exactly what and didn't care. One night, I overheard her laughing with her friends about how I was such a sucker for paying for everything. It stung more than I expected, even though I knew deep down she had always seen me as nothing more than a walking wallet. But I didn't say anything. I kept watching, kept tracking every penny they spent. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but I knew this wouldn't end the way they thought it would. By the 5th month, the balance had dropped from $5 to just $5,000. Half of it was gone, and the bills for the house were nowhere near that amount. I could see it clearly now. They had been using my money for their own luxuries. The house was barely half paid for, but Valerie and my parents and like nothing had changed. The money I had trusted them with had been spent on things that didn't even matter. I wasn't just upset, I was furious. But I still stayed silent. The test wasn't over yet. It wasn't until one Sunday afternoon that everything came to a head. I was in my room, some work emails, when I heard voices in the living room. My parents, Valerie, all talking excitedly. I couldn't make out the words, but the energy in their voices was unmistakable. Something was happening. Curious, I walked into the living room, bracing myself. There they were, sitting on the couch like everything was fine. My mother had that wide, proud smile on her face, the kind that always made me feel like something was about to go terribly wrong. "Alejandro," my welled to me with a smile. "Come, we have wonderful news." I glanced over at my father, who was sitting beside her, his hands nervously clutching the armrest. Valerie sat across from them, a strange smile playing her lips. She seemed almost smug, like she knew something I didn't. "Son," my father began, his voice shaky, "we've made an important decision for the family." "What decision?" I asked, the curiosity in my voice and the unease crawling up my spine. Valerie leaned forward, her eyes bright. "We bought a house," she said, almost gleefully. "Well, we made the down payment on a house, a beautiful 3-bedroom house. It's for me, actually." My heart dropped in my stomach. I didn't say, "And how did you pay for it?" I managed to ask, though I already knew the answer. The silence that followed was thick with tension. My father's eyes flickered nervously as he shifted in his seat. "We used the money from your card," he admitted, not looking me in the eye. "We spent nigh 5% of your savings to pay the down payment. It was $4,750, but it was worth it. Your sister has a house now." He sounded like he was trying to justify it, but the words didn't hit me the way he thought they would. I sat there, as my mother continued. "We're gonna move in with Valerie, too. The 3 of us, your father, me, and Valerie, will have more space. Sure, the neighborhood's not the best, but a house is a house." I didn't know how to process what I was hearing. They had spent almost all of the money I had trusted them with, money I had worked my whole life to earn, and not on something that would improve our lives, but on something entirely for Valerie. They hadn't even considered asking me, discussing it with me, or even showing any gratitude for what I had given them. Instead, they saw it as just their right to take it all. I glanced at Valerie, who was practically glowing with excitement. "You don't have a penny left," she laughed, mocking me. "But you should be happy for me. I finally have my own house." It was a cruel laugh, the kind that hits you right in the chest and stays there long after it's over. And in that moment, everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed, hit me harder than I expected. They didn't see me, not at all. They saw me as a tool, a means to an end. I opened my mouth to say something, but then I just laughed. I didn't know why at first, but as the sound bubbled up from my chest, I realized it was the only thing I could do. I laughed because the irony was too much to handle. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken it all from me. I laughed because they didn't know the truth. They didn't know how much I had been hiding from them. And that laugh, it felt like the beginning of something new. I sat there in silence, trying to process what I had just heard. They had spent 95% of my savings to buy a house for Valerie, without even asking me. They hadn't even considered how I might feel about it. They assumed that whatever money I made, whatever I had built, was theirs for the taking. I looked at their faces. My father was shifting uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. My mother, usually so confident, looked pale and almost fragile. And Valerie had that smile on her face, the one that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry, not one bit. She thought this was her victory. She was going to have a house, and all it took was using me to get it. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. How could I say anything when the truth was right in front of me? They had been using me all along, not just for money, but for everything. They had never really cared about me, at least, not in the way I had hoped. I had spent years taking care of them, sacrificing my own dreams, and this was what I got in return. A house for Valerie. A life built on my shoulders, and now, it seemed, they were just going to leave me behind when they no longer needed me. Finally, I found all of it, I said, my voice low but steady. Everything I gave you, you spent it on a house for Valerie. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. Then he said, "We thought." "You thought what?" I interrupted. "You thought I wouldn't care. You thought you could just take my money without asking and I wouldn't notice." Valerie's smug smile never faltered. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to get upset, to cry or shout, to do something dramatic. I was beyond that. I had already seen the truth. The only thing left now was for me to make them see it too. "You didn't even ask me," I said, my voice hardening. "You didn't ask me if I was okay with it. You didn't ask me if I even wanted to give you this money. You just assumed." "That's not." My mother cut her off. "No," I said, standing up from the couch. I had to get up. I couldn't sit there anymore, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. "That's exactly what you did. You assumed that I would be fine with what I've always been. Fine. The one who takes care of everything. The one who makes sure you have what you need while I go without. And for what?" I paced the room, the anger bubbling up inside me, each word like a release valve. I didn't care anymore. It was all spilling like I'm just a tool for you to use. You think I don't have my own life. But I do, and it's time you all knew that. You've been treating me like I'm nothing but your personal bank account for years, and I'm done. I paused for a moment, letting the words settle between us. My family sat there, stunned, their eyes wide with shock. They hadn't expected this. I don't think they had ever expected me to stand up for myself. "You know," I said, my voice softening, "I thought for a long time that I would do the right thing. That helping you was what I was supposed to do. But now, I see it for what it really was. You never cared about me. You never respected me. You just wanted what I could give you." My mother looked like she was about to say something, but I wasn't interested in the eerie. I turned to Valerie, who had been quiet until now, watching me with that same smug expression. "You," I said, pointing at her, "are the worst. You're the one who always acted like I owed you something. Like you were entitled to everything I worked for. But not anymore." I felt my heart racing. The words kept coming, like I was finally releasing a weight I had carried for so long. I hadn't even realized how much I needed to say this until the moment was upon me. "I gave you everything," I said, looking at all of them, "my money, my trust. And this is how you repay me. By spending everything I had, and kicking me out like I don't matter." It was at that moment that I realized I didn't have to stay in this house anymore. I didn't have to keep sacrificing for people who saw me leave. I could finally be free. The idea felt strange at first, like it wasn't really possible, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I looked at them one last time, my decision made. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. "I don't care what you think. I'm done with all of this." The room fell silent. I saw the panic in their eyes as they processed what I had just said. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Valerie opened her mouth to say something, didn't give her the chance. I grabbed my things, packed my bag, and walked out of that house without looking back. I had never felt so alive, so free. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally doing something for myself. No more catering to being their crutch. It was time for me to live my life the way I wanted to. I didn't even care where I was going, as long as it was away from them. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so free. The weight of my family's expectations had been lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about them, their bills, or their needs. I didn't have to keep sacrificing for people who didn't even appreciate it. I packed my things and left, leaving behind the house, the lies, crushing, feeling that I was just a tool for them to use. I moved into my new penthouse the next day. It wasn't much at first, just an empty space, bare walls, and the hum of silence that echoed around me as I stood there taking it all in. I had never tried a place that was mine. Growing up, I'd always shared space with my parents and Valerie. Now I had my own place all to myself, and the realization hit me hard. This was mine, my hard work, my decision. Everything here had been earned by me from me. The apartment wasn't large, but it didn't matter. It was perfect. 2 bedrooms, a modern kitchen, and floor-to-ceiling windows that gave me a view of the city. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was mine. The first night I spent there, I sat on the couch, staring out the window, just taking it all in. I could feel the stress slowly seeping out of me. It was a feeling I hadn't had in so long, a feeling of peace. But that peace didn't last long. About a week after I moved in, I started getting was the first. At first, I ignored her. I had made it clear to her that I needed space. But after a few more missed calls, I picked up the phone, thinking maybe something important had happened. "Alejandro, please," my mother's voice as soon as I answered. "We need to talk. We've made a terrible mistake. We were wrong." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother, who had never apologized for anything, was now asking for forgiveness. I listened, but I didn't say anything. I was still processing anything. I had spent so long carrying the weight of their problems, doing everything for them, and now after all of this, they were asking me to come down. "We're sorry, Alejandro. We never should have spent your money. We should have talked to you first. We were wrong," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt something inside me stir: anger, disappointment, frustration. I had made my decision. I was done. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I gave you everything. I gave you money, my time, and my trust. And what did I get in return? You took it all. You spent my money on things that weren't even necessary, and now you want me to come back and fix everything. I can't do that." She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her sniffling, trying to hold back tears. "Alejandro, please, we didn't know. If we had known that you had so much money." I stopped her before she could finish. "You didn't ask, you never asked. You assumed that whatever I had, you could take. That I would always be there to take care of everything. Well, I'm not doing that anymore." I hummed another word, feeling the anger build in me, but also a sense of relief. They thought that a simple apology would change things. But it was too late for that. A few days later, I heard from Valerie. She called me late at night, her voice pleading. "Brother, please, we near it. The first mortgage payment is due in a few days, and we don't have the money. If we don't pay, the bank is going to start foreclosure proceedings. Please, just this once." I let her talk, her words tumbling out in a rush, but I feel a flicker of sympathy. I didn't feel anything for them anymore. "You should have thought of that before," I said flatly. "Before you spent all that money I gave you. Before you kicked me out. Now it's your problem. I'm not going to fix it for you." "Alejandro, please, family," she said, her voice desperate. "We can't do this without you." I almost laughed, but the bitterness kept it down. "You're not my family," I said quietly. "Not anymore. Not after everything. You used me, and now you have to deal with the consequences." She begged, but I didn't answer. I ended the call, blocking her number immediately. They had no idea what it meant to truly value someone. They had only seen me as a resource, someone to be used when it was convenient. The next few weeks were a blur. I focused on my work, my life, and the new freedom I had found. I started to get into a routine, waking up, going to work, coming home, enjoying the solitude of my apartment. For the first time, I didn't have to worry about being called on to pay for something, or to bail them out of another jam. I didn't have to listen to their complaints or their expectations. I could just breathe. But then, as the weeks went on, I started hearing whispers from my cousins. Miguel was the first to reach out, his tone serious as he delivered the news. "Have you heard, Alejandro?" he asked. "They lost the house. The bank lost on it last week. They couldn't pay the mortgage. Your parents and Valerie are living in a tiny room now. They're all working multiple jobs just to make ends meet." I didn't feel the rush of guilt that I thought I would. Instead, I felt nothing, just emptiness. This was their doing. They had made this bed, and now they had to lie in it. I didn't owe them anything. They had already taken enough from me. Miguel pushed the issue. "Aren't you going to help them? They're your family after all." I didn't hesitate. "They're not my family anymore. They never were." I hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. This was my life now. It was my decision. And I wouldn't let anyone else take it from me. The days that followed felt surreal, like I had stepped into a life I'd always imagined, but never thought would actually be mine. The penthouse became my sanctuary, a space I could finally call my own. The constant hum of the city outside became the soundtrack to my new life, a life that was mine to control. I wasn't just escaping my family anymore, stepping into my own future. I had always thought that, once I moved out, once I cut ties, I'd feel some sort of overwhelming relief, maybe even triumph. But instead, it was this strange emptiness that lingered. I found myself staring at the walls of my apartment sometimes, wondering if I was doing the right thing. They were my family, after all. How could I just leave them behind? How could I let them fall apart? But I quickly realized the truth: they had made their choices. They had already shown me exactly who they were, and I couldn't go back to that. The person I had been before, someone who bent over backward for their approval, who worked endlessly to keep the peace, to fill in the gaps, were gone. It had taken years, but I had finally reached a point where I could see them for what they were. They weren't just using me, they were taking me for granted. And that wasn't something I could fix. Not anymore. Then the calls started coming, relentless, persistent. My mother, Valerie, even my father. Every time I saw their names flash on my phone, my stomach churned. But I refused to pick up. I didn't need their guilt or their pleas. I had already made my decision. They had to learn to live with the consequences of their actions. It wasn't until 2 weeks after I moved out that I finally picked up the phone. It was Valerie, of course. She never gave up, never stopped trying to get through to me. "Alejandro, please," she begged, her voice laced with desperation. Can't make ends meet. You've got to help us." I didn't say anything at first. Her words echoed in my mind, but there was nothing left to say. I had been here before, listening to her excuses, her manipulations. But this time, I wasn't going to be swayed. I had learned the hard way that what I did, it would never be enough for them. "You should have thought of that before," I said, my voice cold. "Before you spent my money on a house you couldn't afford. Before you kicked me out thinking I wouldn't matter. I'm not your safety net anymore. You made this bed, now you have to lie in it." She was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her trying to gather herself. "Alejandro, please. I know we messed up, but we're family. You can't just leave us like this." The words stung, but I had to stay firm. "I already left. I left the moment you spent my savings without asking. The moment you treated me like I was nothing more than your personal ATM. That's not family, Valerie. Family doesn't do that." There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was shaky, quieter. "But we need you." I felt a pang of sunken guilt, but it was quickly buried by the anger that followed. "No, you don't need me. You just need what I can give you. And I'm done giving. I'm done being your crutch. I'm done being the one who bails you out every time you make a mess of your life." She tried to argue again, but I cut her off. "I'm not helping you. You have to figure it out on your own. This is the reality now. You wanted to live without me. Well, now you're going to have to live with the consequences." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't want to hear it. I heard enough. For years, I had been nothing more than their safety net, the one they turned to when things went wrong. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was done. The days passed, and the calls kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. My father tried next, his voice trembling with the son from meteor plea. "Son, we need your help. This is serious. We can't afford to lose the house." The bills were behind Alejandro. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. They had made their choices. They had spent everything, including my trust, and they had to live with that. Then came a message from a cousin, Miguel. He wasn't like the others. He had always been a little more down to earth, and I knew he wasn't calling to beg for money. "Alejandro," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "Know if you've heard, but the bank foreclosed on the house. It's over." I didn't feel the rush of guilt I thought I would. Instead, there was this strange sense of finality. This was it. They were on their own now. "I know," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I've mine, and it's their fault. Not mine." He didn't press the issue. I could tell he understood. "Just wanted to make sure you knew," he said before hanging up. I put the phone down and sat in silence. I thought about my family, about how they living in a tiny room, scraping by, working jobs they probably hated. I knew they were struggling, but I also knew they had brought it on themselves. And that realization, that truth, hit me harder than anything than done. It was over. I wasn't going to help them anymore. I wasn't going to keep carrying the weight of their mistakes. For the first time, I felt truly free. I had no obligations, no guilt. The burden I had carried for so long was gone. I could breathe, and no one could take that from me. A few weeks passed in the silence I had been craving. My new life, free from the constant pull of my family's needs, settled into a routine. I woke up in the mornings, went to work, came home my quiet apartment, and spent my evenings the way I had always imagined, on my own terms. No more calls demanding money, no more pleading for forgiveness. Just me living my life. But peace, as I had learned, is fleeting. It started with a message. At first I ignored it. It was from a short, pleading and desperate. "Alejandro, please. We need to talk. We made a terrible mistake. Please come home. We miss you." I read it once, then deleted it. I couldn't even bring myself to respond. It felt like I had finally earned the right to live my life without them. The last thing I needed was to let them back in. But the messages kept coming. Then came the phone calls. They started out once a day, then 2 or 3 times a day. My father, Valerie, called. My mother called. each one leaving voicemails from guilt-laden apologies to desperate pleas for help. It was clear they had no intention of accepting the fact that I was done. They thought that with enough pressure, I would cave, that I would forgive them, that I would come back. The calls never stopped. I ignored it wasn't until one evening, just as I was finishing dinner, that the doorbell rang. I froze. Who could it be? I hadn't been expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole, my heart skipping a beat when I saw them, my parents and Valerie, standing on the other side of the door. Their faces were drawn and tired, but there was something else there too, desperation. I almost turned away, but something made me open the door. It was like I was watching myself from the outside, as if I had no control over my own actions. When I opened the door, I saw my mother first. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked older, like the weight of their struggles had aged her. My father was beside her, his posture slumped as if the burden of everything was finally too much for him. Valerie stood behind them, her arms, her expression unreadable. For a moment, none of them spoke. They just stood there, looking at me like I was a ghost they had summoned. My mother stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Alejandro, we know we've hurt you. We know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we're asking for anyway." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching them. What did they expect from me? An apology, an excuse? Did they really think I would just forget everything? "We've lost everything," my father said, his voice shaky. "We don't know what to do. We can't afford rent anymore. We're living in a room, all three of us. It's humiliating. We need you, Alejandro." I could see the desperation in his eyes. The words came out in broken fragments, like he was clinging to the last thread of hope that I would help them. It was tempting. It really was. It had always been tempting to fix things for them, to make everything better the way I used to. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. "You should have thought about that before," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Before you spend everything I gave you. Before you kicked me out, thinking I wouldn't care. I'm not your backup anymore." Valerie stepped forward, her expression changing from one of defiance to one of panic. "Please, Alejandro, you're our brother. You can't just leave us like this." I shook my head slowly. "I already left. I left when you spent my money on things that weren't necessary. I left when you laughed at me and kicked me out. You think I'm just supposed to come back and fix everything? No, I'm not doing that." My mother looked like she was going to cry, but I didn't feel the familiar rush of guilt I thought would come. I didn't feel anything, really. There was just this overwhelming certainty that I had made the right decision. "We can't afford the house we bought," my father added. "We didn't through. We thought we could make it work without you." I looked at them, at my parents, who had never asked for my opinion, never considered me in their decisions, and at Valerie, who had always seen me as an endless source of money. They had taken everything I had to offer, and now they were begging for more. I looked at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me, and I felt nothing but disgust. They didn't deserve my help, not anymore. "I'm not going to rescue you," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choices. You have to live with them. I'm not a part of this anymore." For a moment, they just stared at me. I saw their faces falter, the realization sinking in that I wasn't going to change my mind. And for the felt something shift inside me, a sense of finality, of strength. I wasn't going to be their crutch any longer. I was done. Then, my father spoke one last time. "Alejandro, we've always been a family. You can't just turn your back on us." I looked at him, my gaze on other. "A family values each other," I said softly. "A family doesn't use each other until there's nothing left to take. You aren't my family anymore." I didn't wait for them to respond. I closed the door, locking it behind me, and leaned against it for a moment. My heart was pounding in my chest, but the clarity I felt was undeniable. They weren't my family anymore. They hadn't been for a long time. I walked away from the door, into the silence of my apartment, and for the first time since I could remember, I felt at peace. A month had passed, my family out of my life, and each day felt like a new chapter. I'd moved on, building my life in a way that felt right for me, without their interference. I could finally breathe, free from the suffocating mist they had placed on me for years. I was enjoying my apartment, its quiet, its peace, finding joy in the little things. I worked, invested, and explored. I spent my weekends visiting new places around the city, discovering parts of myself I didn't even know existed. But the calls came again. This time I was more prepared. I had already blocked their numbers, but somehow they still managed to find a way to reach me. Emails, social media messages, and finally the letter. The one I hadn't been expecting. It came in a thick envelope, its edges frayed from laundry it must have taken. The moment I saw it, I knew it was from. My heart sank. I opened the letter slowly, feeling that familiar mix of dread and curiosity. The words were written carefully, almost painfully so, as if they knew that this was their last chance. Alejandro, it began. We know we've made terrible mistakes. We know we don't deserve your forgiveness. But we're asking for it anyway. We've lost everything. The house is gone. The money is gone. And now we're living in a small, cramped room. We can't survive like this, please. Just come home. We need you. I need you. We're sorry. Please, just forgive us. I read the letter twice before setting it down on the kitchen counter. I couldn't bring myself to feel anything for it. The words, the apology, didn't have the impact they should have. They were just words. Empty words from people who had taken everything from me and thought they could fix it with a letter. A letter I knew was only sent because they were desperate, not because they truly understood what they had done. I didn't want to go back. I couldn't, not after everything. A few days later, I got a call from Miguel, the cousin who had told me about their foreclosure. He was always the one who tried to bridge me and my family. He was one of the few who understood the situation, even if he didn't entirely agree with my decision. Alejandro, he said, his tone serious. I don't know if you've heard, but things are getting really bad for them. Your mother's working double shifts, your father's doing odd jobs, and Valerie. Well, she's been trying to get another job, but it's tough. They're all struggling, man. And they're asking for your help. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wasn't sure why he called. I didn't think he needed anything from me. Mig wasn't the type to beg, but this was different. I know you're mad at them, he continued. I get it, but they need you. They're not asking for money, they just want you back. They need to know that you're there for them. I could hear the pain in his voice. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about them too. He cared about them, even though they had hurt him too. I'm not going back, Miguel, I said quietly, trying to keep the coldness out of my voice. I've made my decision. I can't go back and fix what's already broken. They need to learn how to live without me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Miguel finally spoke. I understand, man, I thought you should know. I don't expect you to do anything. I just wanted you to hear it from me. I appreciate that, my voice firm. But I can't help anymore. I've helped them my whole life, and they still don't get it. I'm not going to be their safety net anymore. I could almost feel Miguel nodding on the other end. I get it. Just don't be too hard on yourself, Kay. I know you're doing what's best for you. I hung up without saying another word, my mind racing. Was I being too harsh? Was I being selfish? Maybe. But deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. They had used me, taken everything I had to offer, and now they were trying to make guilty for choosing myself. It was time for me to stop being the one who always fixed things. The next few days were quiet. The calls stopped, and I felt a sense of peace return to my life. I went about my days focusing on my work and my investments, carving out a future self that didn't include them. It was freeing, but it was also isolating. Then, one night just as I was getting ready to go to bed, I heard a knock at the door. My heart stopped. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door slowly, my pulse quickening as I saw the familiar faces standing on the other side. My mother, father, and Valerie. There was no anger in their eyes, no resentment. Just desperation. We need to talk, my mother said softly, her voice filled with something I heard in a long time: regret. I stood there, staring at them. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it certainly wasn't this. The three of them, standing on my doorstep, looking like they had aged 10 years in the short time since I'd last seen them. I'm not going, Bass said, my voice steady. You've already had your chance. I'm done. You can't just show up and expect things to go back to the way they were. My father looked at me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't place. Please, Alejandro. We don't know what else to do. We're lost with my head. You'll figure it out. You've got to. I can't keep doing this for you. I closed the door before they could say anything else, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew it was the right decision, but part of me felt as losing something. Was it love? Or just a part of who I had once been? Either way, I knew it was over. I wasn't going to be the person they had tried to make me. And that was exactly how it was supposed to be. It had been several months since I last saw my family. The silence that had surrounded me was almost peaceful. There was no noise, no manipulation, no guilt. Just me, living my life the way I had always wanted, without any strings attached. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The world fast, full of opportunities, and it was mine for the taking. I spent my days focusing on my work, on the projects that excited me, and on the little things I had never had time for before. I started traveling, exploring places I had always wanted to visit but never had the chance to. I was free, truly free, and I relished every moment of it. My penthos became a reflection of my newfound independence, a place I could call my own, where I didn't have to answer to anyone. But Frieden always comes at a price. It was a Tuesday when the unexpected call came. I was sitting at my desk in the office, going over sales reports, when my assistant knocked gently on the door. "Mr. Delgado, there are 3 people reception who are asking to see you. They say it's urgent." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't have to ask who it was. I could feel it in my gut. "I already told them you weren't available," she continued, her voice cautious. "But they're causing a scene. They won't leave unless they speak with you." I stood up from my desk, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had spent so much time building this life for myself, and now here they were again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Kyle said, my voice firm, "Tell them to be on standby. I'll go down and speak with them." I walked to the elevator, the familiar hum of the building only adding to the tension I felt. As the doors opened and I stepped into them immediately, my parents were standing near the reception desk, looking worn and exhausted. Valerie was with them, her arms crossed, standing tall but with a look of desperation in her eyes. They saw me almost immediately, and their face a strange mixture of relief and desperation. My mother rushed forward, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Alejandro, please, we need to talk." I didn't speak, I just stood there staring at them. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. I had made it clear to them that I was done. But give up. They never did. "We know we hurt you," my mother continued, her voice cracking. "We were wrong, Alejandro, we didn't understand. But we do now. We're sorry." I wanted to feel something. Anger, maybe resentment, definitely. But all I felt was a cold emptiness. This was just another attempt to manipulate me. Just another effort to get me back into the role I had spent years trying to escape. "Please," my father said, his voice shaky. "We lost everything. We can't even afford our rent anymore. We're living in a small room, it's humiliating. Working so hard, but we're barely making it. Please, we need your help." I could see it in their faces, how they had fallen apart without me. How they had made their bed and now they were trying to get me to lie in it with them. But I couldn't. Not anymore. "I'm not going to help you." My voice calm but unyielding. "You had your chance. You spent everything I gave you. You kicked me out. And now you want me to come back and fix everything for you." "No." Valerie stepped forward, her eyes wide with panic. "You don't understand, she do. The mortgage is due. If we don't pay, the bank is going to foreclose. We're going to lose everything. Please, we need you." Her voice broke, and I could hear the desperation in it. But I couldn't let it affect me. I had seen this act before. I had been here a time for him help only to be taken for granted. "You think I'm just supposed to come back and fix everything?" I said. "You think I'm still your safety net? I'm not done. I've given you everything, and you used me until there was nothing left. This is your nothing. You have to deal with it." The words hung in the air between us. They all looked at me, wide-eyed and shocked, as if they had never considered that I might walk away for good. But I had. I had already walked back. Coming back. "Please, Alejandro." My mother said, her voice breaking. "We made a mistake. We didn't know how much you were helping us. If we had known, we would have never treated you like this." I could see the tears in her eyes, and for a moment, a flicker of guilt passed through me. But it was quickly extinguished. They hadn't cared about me when it mattered. They hadn't respected me when I needed it most. And now, when they had nothing left, they expected me to save them. I looked at them one last time. "You're not my family anymore," I said quietly. "You used to be. A family doesn't treat each other like this. You used me until you didn't need me anymore. And now you're on your own." I turned and walked away from them, towards the elevator. As I stepped inside, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I had said my piece. I had given them every chance they could have asked for. The doors closed behind me, and as the elevator descended, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. I was free. Free from the guilt, free from the obligation, free to live my life for myself. And as I walked back into my apartment later, knew this was it. No more compromises. No more looking back. This was my life, and I was going to live it on my own terms.